And her coming down out of the sky with that umbrella now looks like the descent of some malevolent creature coming down to take on these children. The whole tone changes. And I think sometimes we take the stories of the Bible and we don't take everything about those stories, like the story of Uzzah that we looked at earlier. And we draw wrong conclusions. If you never saw Mary Poppins and all you saw was Scary Mary, you wouldn't want her coming to your house to watch your children. These stories are important for us to look at. And we may say, well, whatever the Bible teaches, I'm going to accept it even if I can't reconcile it. I think is an immature way to understand the Scriptures, because we need to reconcile the acts of God with the heart of God. Those two are connected. And it's important for us, I think, to examine these stories. It's okay to wrestle with the text, because in doing so, we come to know God better. And sometimes we come to the conclusion, I don't understand, I'll just have to trust him. And that's not a bad thing, and that's not a stupid thing to do. I go to doctors who do things to me that I wouldn't let anybody else do to me. Somebody on the street came up and said, hey, I'd like to just stick this needle in your arm. Can I do that? I'd say, you do it, I'll have you arrested. But I go to a doctor and I allow him to do it. And I don't always understand what he's doing or why he's doing it. I don't always understand when he says, I'm going to cut on you. We're going into surgery. I don't always understand what all that's about, but I trust him. And there is a point at which I trust God. I understand that. I'm not against that. I do that. But that doesn't mean I have to just take everything in the Bible and say, I don't need to look at it further. I don't need to understand that in a deeper way, because he's God and I'm not, and I'll just trust him. Because there's a world out there that wants answers to questions before they'll come to the faith we've come to. And it's important for us to know that God. So we're going to look at preaching this bloody gospel, the awkward and difficult and sometimes unpleasant portions. And this morning I want to look at 2 Kings chapter 2 with you as we look at Elisha and what I'm calling the good news bears. There was a movie made a few years ago about the bad news bears. These are the good news bears, not because they necessarily bring good news, but because they're found in the gospel. They're found in the good message. And maybe there's something about this that we can find valuable. Now here's the story as we often hear it. Elisha has just been appointed the prophet of God. And he is on his way back to civilization. And he runs into these boys who begin ridiculing him for his lack of hair. And Elisha calls on God to do something about it, and this is what he does. That's the story as we often view it. And I'll let you look at that for a minute. That's a horrifying thought. I will tell you, and I'm going to say this, it's in the cartoon form, but I only downloaded a cartoon form of it because, first of all, I don't know that I've ever seen a massacre of humans by bears in life that somebody captured. But even if they were, I'm not sure I would put that on a picture and show that in the presence of small children, and maybe they can overlook the comic aspect of it. But to see there's a reality there that is quite sobering. So let's look at the background of that story. I'm going to move backwards to the this screen so you don't keep looking at that. Elijah. Now listen, you got to hear the pronunciation. Overlook my southern drawl. Elijah is being removed from the earth, and his protege, his intern, his successor, Elisha, wants to go with him when he's been told, Elijah's been told, you're not long for this earth. You're done. Your ministry is done. And Elisha says, I want to go with you. And Elijah says, no, you wait here. And Elisha says, nope, I'm going. And some of the prophets, the school of prophets that are found in various places, some of those come out and they say to Elisha, hey, did you know your master is being taken from you today? That word's been given to them by God. And he says, yes, be quiet. I know about that. And he goes with Elijah a little further. And then Elijah says, hey, you wait here. I'm going on. And he says, nope, I'm going with you. And that happens 3 times. And then Elijah says to Elisha, I'm getting ready to go. Is there anything you want me to do for you before I leave? And Elisha says, yes. It's a very bold thing. I want a double portion of your power. And Elijah says, I can't give that. But I will tell you this. If you see me when God takes me from the earth, then you'll know that that's been granted to you. But if you don't see me when I go, then that's been denied to you. God's not giving you that. And they come to the Jordan River, and Elijah takes his mantle, the covering for his head and shoulders. He takes that mantle and he kind of wraps it up into a kind of a long, ropey piece, and he strikes the waters of the Jordan River. And when he hits the waters, they just roll back, and he and Elisha walk through on dry land. And they're on the other side of the Jordan. And the sweet chariot of God swings low and comes down in this whirlwind and takes Elijah up. And as he's going up into the air, Elisha utters something that will be uttered by another king about him later when he says, my father, the chariots of Israel and the horsemen thereof. What he's saying by that is, this is the real power. This is the real power of Israel. It's not in physical armies. It is in this great spiritual weapon of God. Well, when Elijah is taken up, his mantle falls to the ground, and Elisha picks it up, and he puts it on his shoulders, and he goes back to the Jordan River, and here's the first test, the big test. He's at the Jordan. He goes, oh, I saw him. Maybe I got it. And he takes that mantle and whack, he hits the water, and sure enough, it rolls back and he comes across. Now, there are in this story some indications that Elisha is not as legitimate a prophet of God as Elijah was. When we read the whole story in 2 Kings, first of all, this question of whether he's got the power Elijah had. Twice the prophets speak to him about Elijah's exodus as though he doesn't know it. As if they're having to tell him about it because he's not aware that it's taking place. And then after he comes back and says, Elijah's ascended, he's been taken up, you know what the prophets say? They say, well, let's go look for his body. We don't think he was really gone. He might have got caught up in that whirlwind and it dumped him someplace like tornadoes can do. Let us go look for his body so we can either revive him or give him a proper burial, I'm guessing. And Elisha says to him, that's not going to do any good. And they said, well, we'd like to go look. So they go searching for his body. And they can't find it. When they come back, he says, I told you. So here again, the prophets are indicating, we're not sure you know everything's going on the way you think it is. We need to tell you he's being taken. And we're not sure we appreciate and agree with the story you gave about how he came to leave the earth. But the chapter is filled with contrasting indications of his legitimacy as a prophet. Proof that he is the prophet of God. This is very important because Elijah just kind of appeared on the scene, a full-blown prophet of God. He wasn't raised up that way like we read about Elijah or Isaiah or Jeremiah or one of the others. He just appears on the scene from nowhere. I'm talking about Elijah. And then he picks Elisha to be his successor. And I'm sure some people thought, who is he to succeed the greatest prophet in Israel's history? So the prophets call Elijah multiple times your master, not our master. The school of the prophets keep talking about him as Elisha's master. And Elisha does see Elijah ascend, and he does wear the mantle, and he does duplicate the miracle at the Jordan, and he does rebuke the school of the prophets for doubting him, and then he saves them from bad water in that spring. By his miracle, he brings them to that point. And it is at that point we come to our story. And it is found very shortly in verses 23 through 24 of 2 Kings chapter 2. And here's the story as we read it. He went up from there to Bethel. And as he was going up by the way, young lads came out from the city, and they mocked him and said to him, "Go up, you bald head, go up, you bald head." And when he looked behind him and saw them, he cursed them in the name of the Lord. And then 2 female bears came out of the woods and tore up 42 lads of their number. That's the story. You saw the one picture there. Now let me give you the elements. Here are the problems of that story as we see it. Number one, these are little boys. Look at those kids. There's little boys. To think about the idea that God had sicked 2 full-grown bears on those kids, those nice boys, little boys, is hard for us to reconcile. Secondly, they're just disrespectful. It's not a big deal. I mean, a kid says to an old guy, "You're bald-headed," and he gets killed for it? Come on. All boys are disrespectful. It is in their genetic makeup. There isn't a man in this room that's honest that wouldn't raise his hand if I said, "Did you ever make fun of anybody when you were a boy?" We all would raise our hands. We all would. We all did. So they said, "Hey, Baldy," that's it. Those little boys did that, and then that was sent to kill him? You know, I got to tell you, there are a lot of ways I don't want to die. A lot of ways I don't want to die. I don't want to fall in a tarantula pit, if there is such a thing. I do not want to be in the woods and the only thing I have to eat if I don't starve to death is liver. I don't want to die that way because I'm going to die. But that is horrifying. because I've seen a bear. Now, I haven't seen one up close like that, but I've seen a bear, and they are ferocious killers. But let's take another look at the text. All right? First of all, they are lads. And while we use the word lad for a little boy, that is not the way the Bible uses the word. When the Bible refers to lads, the Bible is including Joseph at age 17. He is called a lad at age 17. In 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 17, Saul is called a lad after he becomes king of Israel. And you need to think about that. He's anointed king of Israel. And you may say, yeah, but there were some little boy kings like Josiah. I understand that. But Saul's a warrior. You don't see little boys as warriors in Israel's army. He is a noted hero in battle in Israel when he is appointed king, yet he is called a lad. Joshua, when he is serving Moses, is referred to as a lad, but it's clear that Joshua is a young man. Solomon in 1 Kings chapter 3 and verse 7 is referred to as a lad, and this is when he is becoming king of Israel. And David, when he goes against Goliath, is a lad. And yet, and I know, we sing that song, only a little boy, David. We think a little 5-year-old toddler coming out there with a sling, and that is not the story. Folks, listen. Before he met Goliath in battle, he's already killed a bear and a lion. He is not a little boy. Now, I'm not on a crusade to stop that song. That isn't my point. But if you've been thinking of the word lad as describing a little boy, like the ones I had in that picture, you're wrong. Lads can be teenagers and young adults. And I'm going to suggest to you they are old enough to know what they are doing. It is not just teasing a prophet because he doesn't have hair. They are mocking a prophet of God. Let me tell you why I suggest that. First of all, it's where they come from. They are from Bethel. But Bethel happens to be the birthplace of Israel's idolatry. It is where it originated in Israel's history. So what we have here are young men who've come from the town where idolatry is in opposition to the God Jehovah. I'm going to suggest to you they are in all likelihood idolatrous young men. And this attack on Elisha goes far beyond his lack of hair. It is, in fact, mocking him as a representative of God because of what they say. Listen to the words. It isn't just, hey, Baldy. It is, go up, you bald-headed man. Now, what is the going up about? Well, what's just happened? Elijah's gone up. Elijah's been taken up by God to leave this earth. And what they are mocking him about is that story. Either their belief in that story, oh yeah, your prophet went up by God. Why don't you just go up with him if you can do that? This is, in essence, no different than those who stood at the foot of the cross and said, he saved others, let him save himself. It's no different. Oh, you claim to have been able to save others. Well, save yourself. You claim he went up. You saw the prophet of God go up, and you're the prophet after him. Yeah, we see it. You got his mantle. You're the guy. Well, go up. Let's see you do it. Do it. Your God's so big. He's so tough. He's so strong. Let's see your God take you up. In fact, why don't you do it? We'd like to be rid of you too. Now, are you feeling differently about those little boys thumbing their noses at a bald-headed man? You see the difference? And let me suggest one more thing to you. When they say bald head, literally they're saying you who is naked of your head. And that has nothing to do with physical nakedness. It has perhaps everything to do with authority. You are without your head, Elijah. And in that context, it may be they're saying, you're useless. Why don't you just go with him? You don't even have a master anymore. They are not just mocking Elisha. They are not just mocking perhaps his lack of hair. They are mocking Elijah, and they are mocking the God of both of those men. They are laughing at the funeral of Elijah. They know what they're doing. They know where they've come from. And they are borderline, absolute, out-and-out blasphemy. And then there's the third point. I'm going to suggest to you they are mauled. They are not killed. The word literally means to tear or rip. It is not the word for murder or kill. It's not the same word. Now, listen to it again. He cursed them in the name of the Lord. And by the way, curse them in the name of the Lord is not cussed at them. He didn't cuss at them. He cursed them, brought God's curse upon them. And 2 female bears came out of the woods and tore up 42 lads of their numbers. I remember hearing the story about a Bible class teacher who was telling the story, I think perhaps erroneously, and talking about what these bears did, and said, man, and these bears came out there and ate up those boys. 2 she-bears. How much you figure 2 bears could eat? And one little kid said, 42 boys. The New American Standard says tore up. Tore up. There are others that say mauled, ripped. But it would not be accurate to say killed. That's not the term. That's not the Hebrew term for this. My father was a gentle man in most respects, but he was pretty authoritarian. And he said, son, I remember him saying, son, you do that one more time, I'm going to tear you up. I knew what he meant. I didn't go to my mother and said, he's threatening murder. Call the police. I knew what he meant. And I got tore up by my dad a couple of times. And again, by that, I don't mean he was swinging wildly, hitting at me with anything, but he punished me. I want you to just think with me for a moment, and you will see, I think, what I'm trying to say to you. Let's take 2 bears that come running out of the woods, and they're running toward 42 boys. 40, maybe more than 42. Maybe there were more. I mean, and I want to say one more thing I didn't say before. This is not a couple of boys. This is a mob that has come from Bethel. It is a mob of young men. This is a gang. These are the Bethel boys. You know, they've got Bethel boys written on the back of their robes. They have gang signs from Bethel. This is a gang. This is a large group, because it says that the bears tore up 42, but there probably were more than even 42 of them. Because listen, if you saw two bears running out of the woods toward you, what would you do? You would run. And I don't care how smart the bears are, there's only two of them. It's not like you say, hey, you go that way, I'll go this way, we'll cut them off at the pass. Two bears can't do that. 20 or 30 bears, yeah, they could all come out and, well, we're surrounded, we're dead. But two bears can't do that. So what are you going to do if the bear comes running and catches the slowest boy? He swats him down. Well, I hate to say it, but that's just a little more time for you to get away. Do you really think they're all going to just stand there? Who's next? The bears. Who's next? Come on, come on. Whack, whack, whack. Kill that. Bring another one on. How long does it take a bear to kill a boy? It isn't as though that they could just every one whack, bite, and all of them are dead. It takes a while to kill somebody. Bears maul their victims. They don't just, it's not like a shark attack one time, half your body's gone. It isn't that way. So it takes a little bit of time. So how slow are these young men that 42 of them can't get away from two bears? No. Those bears didn't kill them. Those bears sent them home bruised and bloodied. Those bears waded into that mob of boys, striking left and right, and they're slashing this way, and they're nipping and biting, and they're trampling. But that picture that you saw earlier isn't the picture of this story. That's more like it. They're running. They're fleeing. They're doing everything they can to get away. I'm going to tell you something. They live to go home to Bethel to tell what the bald-headed prophet did to them. That is the story of Elisha and those bears. Mauled, not killed. God's messengers, somebody says, can't God's messengers take a joke? Come on, it's a little joke about his hair. God's messengers can take a joke like anybody else. But idolatry and laughing at the God of the universe is not funny to God's people, nor to God himself. So when we see that story in a different light, you may, and you have every right to go away from that story this morning and say, well, even the way you told it, Ralph, I still don't like it. I think God's being pretty vindictive there. You can take that if you want to, but I want to suggest to you, be careful about making light of the power of God and the authenticity of his spokesman. I see this story as saying, you better take that real seriously. Well, that's one of our stories. We're going to talk about some more. I'm going to invite you to bring your friends. I invite you to bring them. We're going to talk about that whole concept of God ordering the destruction of everybody in the world, it looks like. And we're going to talk about the flood that Noah experienced and how that fits with the God we know of the New Testament. We'll be talking about some of those other stories that we find in the scriptures tomorrow night, Tuesday night, and Wednesday night. I'll be kind to your friends. I'll be as kind as I was this morning. I'm not going to jump people that take other views about that and belittle their views. I understand how they draw those conclusions. I think sometimes erroneously, and sometimes they draw the right conclusion, and I'm forced to defend the God who did those things that may be offensive to some of us, but I'm prepared to do that with the stories that we're looking at and the very incidents that we have one after another in the Scriptures. We're going to sing a song of encouragement, and I haven't told you in any way, shape, or form how to be saved, except from she-bears. Don't talk bad about God or his prophets. Don't make fun of bald-headed people. And run faster than the next guy. But salvation that matters, salvation from sin, I haven't told you how to do that. And I wouldn't presume to tell you that in just a couple of minutes. Here's all you need to do, because becoming a child of God's a lifetime decision. It's the most important decision you'll ever make in your life. More important than who you marry, more important than where you live, more important than what career you have, because this decision will affect eternity. Eternity. But if you've been thinking about becoming a child of God, if that's been on your heart and on your mind, maybe this morning is a good time for you to put on Christ, to wash away your sins in the waters of baptism, and to become a child of God. Maybe this morning is a good time for you to come and seek prayers of this congregation. Maybe let people know you haven't always treated God with the reverence you should have treated him with. Maybe you've belittled or made fun of things that after this morning's lesson you're thinking, that's a really dangerous thing to do. You want prayers about that? We'll pray with you about those things. If there's something we can do to help you find the deep relationship, not superficial, the deep relationship that we should have with our God and with the Christ who died for us, why don't you come to the front right now while we stand and sing this song.
Something more than wealth or fame. He gave me something worth living for. Oh, the joy of sin forgive. Nothing the same as before. My life flows since Jesus came and gave me something worth living for. Something more than my yesterdays, more than I had before.